We're kicking off with Smackdown, which opened with a recap from Clash at the Castle before CM Punk arrived to a huge pop from the Chicago crowd and spent a few minutes shaking hands with the fans and doing laps before speaking. Punk began by addressing some nostalgic moments and then shifted his focus to Drew McIntyre, who quit WWE on Raw after being embarrassed in Glasgow by the best in the world. Punk was interrupted by his former manager and longtime friend Paul Heyman, who embraced him as he entered the ring, and the wise man looked visibly emotional before speaking. Heyman informed Punk that Solo Sikoa was not pleased to hear Chicago being Punk's town and warned him the Bloodline were coming out if Punk did not leave. True to their word, the Bloodline did come out, and Solo said that Punk should show them respect or receive a beating at their hands, and Punk, as expected, refused to bow. Punk was swiftly backed up by the arrival of Cody Rhodes with a couple of baseball bats, who threw out the challenge to settle things with Solo Sikoa. This was a fantastic segment that somehow lasted 20 minutes without overstaying its welcome, with Heyman delivering on another level, while Punk looks fired up to be back in the mix. In the main event, Sikoa was scheduled to face Cody Rhodes, but ahead of the match, Heyman approached Sikoa and said he was breaking commandment. The wise man also said that he and Roman Reigns had agreed that CM Punk was off limits since he's close with the Second City Saint and had more to say about the tribal chief. Heyman made clear that the plan has been to keep Cody Rhodes in check for Roman after he returns, but Sikoa dropped the bombshell, saying Reigns is never coming back to WWE. Sikoa did apologize to Heyman about that, and it'll be interesting to see how things go for both men, with Roman Reigns seemingly out of the picture for good. Paul Heyman's interaction with Punk was also interesting, although it seemed to serve the purpose of Heyman's position with the Bloodline rather than anything to do with Punk. Later in the night, in a backstage segment where DIY was trash-talking Grayson Waller, a loud thud was heard in the back, and it was revealed that CM Punk had been attacked. As the metal door lifted, fans learned that Drew McIntyre had laid out the bloody and battered Punk, seemingly returning to WWE after quitting just days ago. McIntyre's assault on Punk continued into the arena, with Nick Aldis and security trying to intervene, and when Aldis shoved McIntyre, the Scottish Warrior shoved him back. This infuriated the SmackDown GM, and the segment ended with footage being shown of Punk being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Following the attack, Drew McIntyre reactivated his Twitter that he shut down after supposedly quitting WWE on Raw, and shared a photo of a man covered in blood. This is another tease for a match that Fightful reports will take place at SummerSlam, and the attack on SmackDown was done to ensure that match can happen. The reasoning within WWE is that writing Punk off TV allows him the time to get fully fit and 100% for SummerSlam, as well as building anticipation towards their match. Rather than having Punk appear regularly, thus increasing the chance of an injury, this attack means he can focus on being ready for what will be an excellent match in Cleveland. WWE wants big matches for their biggest party of the summer, and few are bigger than Punk vs. McIntyre, which of course depends on Punk being medically cleared. But what did you think of all this? Is WWE doing right by saving Punk vs. McIntyre for SummerSlam, or should they have booked it for Money in the Bank? Sound off below. This past Thursday, Pat McAfee welcomed former Navy SEAL and New York Times best-selling author Jack Carr onto his show, but their talk was cut short by something off-screen. Amid the conversation, McAfee, Carr, and staff looked at some obscure phenomena, with McAfee asking, "What the is that?" while Carr asked about the security in the building. After Carr's mention of security, all lights switched off, plunging the set into total darkness, and the broadcast came to an end seconds later, with fans wondering if Wyatt Sicks had struck. On Friday, McAfee and his co-hosts confirmed that a startling and eerie power outage took out the show, shutting it down and leaving a lot of folks worried and confused. Security camera footage was also shared, documenting what happened, and McAfee also shared what happened in a tweet that reads, "I, just like the rest of the boys, saw the assumptions of the Wyatt Sicks being the culprits and that we might be dead. We were gonna address those rumors earlier, but didn't think anyone would ever understand without actually seeing what happened." The footage in question shows a drone floating into the Thunderdome saying, "I've been sent here to end your show," followed by a threat to emit an electromagnetic pulse. In response, Carr dramatically drew out his gun and took out the drone, much to the relief of those present, and the footage was followed by an advertisement for Carr's new book. With this matter addressed, McAfee resumed normalcy on his show, but there was one last issue with yesterday's episode before it went off the air. Near the end of the June 21st edition of the Pat McAfee Show, Pat was reflecting on the upcoming weekend and made clear he's grateful that he is able to pursue his passion. As he began to sign off, the show was unexpectedly interrupted by a stark message that simply read, "You lied," with fans believing that this was from the Wyatt Sicks. Did McAfee lie about what he saw on the Thursday show? If not that, then what is Pat being dishonest about? Fans are certainly hooked on this mystery for the WWE broadcaster. As we saw on Raw, Chad Gable was among those wiped out by the Wyatt Sicks, and it was promptly shared by WWE that he would not be allowed to compete next week. Gable had been scheduled to be part of a Money in the Bank qualifier, and Ilya Dragunov would take his spot instead, but now plans have changed again. On social media, Adam Pearce shared that Gable has been medically cleared and is back on the aforementioned qualifying match on Raw. Pearce's video saw some glitches in another sign of the Wyatt Sicks interference, and the final moment of the video saw a jump scare by what could have been Sister Abigail. Wyatt Sicks actions aside, it's frankly baffling that WWE would write Gable out of the match only to put him back in, and does the Uncle Howdy-led faction no favors whatsoever. After all, it now appears that the Wyatt Sicks attack was nowhere near as bad as first feared now that Gable has been re-added to the match after previously being ruled unable to compete. This will seriously impact the group's aura and is a serious misstep on WWE's part, and hopefully is just a one-off error when it comes to the new group. Speaking of general managers, Nick Aldis shared before Smackdown that he had beefed up security following the attack on Raw, and sure enough, there was not an attack last night. With that said, there were teases of the faction, including in a shot where Cody Rhodes was walking backstage and the group's symbol could be seen on a door. Eagle-eyed fans will have spotted Jason Baker during Drew McIntyre's attack on CM Punk, and Baker has created several masks for WWE, including the one for The Fiend and the Wyatt Sicks. A recap of the Raw attack was aired, which included text in VHS style, just like what fans saw in the QR codes, and images of the puppets appeared when their representative was shown. When Nikki Cross was shown, Abby the Witch was featured, which fans felt was interesting as Cross is donned in tattered white garments, while the Witch is in black. Some have speculated that the black represented Abby the Witch's time in limbo, and that the white marks her arrival into the living world, now inhabiting the body of Nikki Cross. There had been some speculation that Alexa Bliss would play Abby and that Cross would just be the veiled bride, but this SmackDown confirms that Cross and Abby are one and the same. Perhaps this is too much reading into it, but it's clear that even with the QR code mystery solved, there is plenty of speculation running rife about the faction. What do you make of all this? Are you excited for the Wyatt Sicks? And has WWE's U-turn on Chad Gable hurt their aura? Sound off in the comments section below. During a recent edition of his Grilling JR podcast, Jim Ross said he wouldn't rule out Shane McMahon joining AEW and highlighted the character of WWE's prodigal son. On a more recent episode, JR's co-host Conrad Thompson claimed that he'd heard Shane had reached out to AEW about a role, leaving fans speculating on a potential move. In the Wrestling Observer newsletter, though, it's reported that those in AEW who'd likely have knowledge about this have said they haven't heard anything about Shane reaching out. The only place these AEW insiders have heard about Shane joining AEW is on JR's podcast, and when asked, Tony Khan kept his response blunt and to the point, saying, "I've never met him or talked to him in my life." In his report, Dave Meltzer mentions that there was a talk between McMahon and a former WWE talent who is now with AEW, but this was by no means a formal pitch to join the promotion. Instead, this talk was casual, with Shane musing, "Can you imagine if I walked out there on Dynamite?" suggesting it was more of a hypothetical scenario and not a serious proposal. While Shane has plenty of business acumen, it appears that an official AEW role isn't in the cards for him, but in this new era, we know to never say never in professional wrestling. If you've heard from a member of the Anoa'i family, you know they have a lot for their kin, which is why Rikishi's recent social media has taken many by surprise. On Instagram, Rikishi shared a post that a fake family and friends is worse than an enemy, but gave no context as to who he is referring to. As discussed earlier, Cody Rhodes squared off against Solo Sikoa in the main event, but when Rhodes took the lead, Tonga and Tonga Loa interrupted and attacked the babyface. This caused Randy Orton and Kevin Owens to come out and clear the ring. They were then left alone in the ring with Solo Sikoa cornered, and it seemed he'd finally get his due. Sikoa was even begging for amnesty, but his helplessness then turned into a nasty smirk, and at that moment, Jacob Fatu made his WWE debut and laid out Orton and Owens. While it seemed like Cody would be able to fight back, he was overpowered by the werewolf, who planted Rhodes on the announcer's desk with a slam before FATU pledged his loyalty to Sikoa. It had been rumored for weeks that FATU would be joining WWE, and now fans got to see it happen, and the former MLW World Champion delivered upon his arrival. The match itself was a throwaway, but what followed was a great way to bring FATU into the fold and immediately establish him as a threat, and the show ended with the Bloodline standing tall. In footage shared online, the Bloodline made their way to the back, and as Sikoa spoke about keeping the likes of Rhodes and Orton in check, FATU gave his two-word response, "Hell yeah!" Paul Heyman once again looked stunned from the outside of the ring, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially given Solo's claim that Roman Reigns won't be coming back. Heyman is loyal to Roman Reigns over everyone, and has used the example of recent violence from the Tongan brothers as why he doesn't want to associate himself with this new bloodline. With Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga, and Tonga Loa under his sway, Solo Sikoa is more powerful than ever, and that momentum will carry Solo to the biggest party of the summer. That's according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, who reports that the current plan for SummerSlam is for Cody to defend the undisputed WWE title against Sikoa in the main event. It's certainly a leap for Sikoa to make, as it's been less than 2 years since he joined WWE's main roster, and until recently, he was seen as a henchman for a much bigger star. Do you believe WWE is pushing Solo Sikoa too early with this title match? And what do you make of Heyman's role in all this? Let us know in the comments down below. Next month, WWE's AJ Styles will compete at Noah's Destination event when he takes on Naomichi Marufuji in another example of WWE being willing to work with others. Next month, we'll also see Io Sky compete for Marigold at their upcoming Summer Destiny show, and WWE isn't finished working with other companies. It was recently reported that WWE are interested in collaborations in Puerto Rico and Mexico to produce crossover action, and one promotion WWE will likely do business with is AAA. According to the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, AAA owner Dorian Roldan has been in talks with WWE's developmental territory NXT, possibly to discuss business. This would be another huge deal, as AAA is the top promotion in Mexico, and comes amid reports that NXT's deal with TNA is set to continue after several stars have already appeared. Do you want to see AAA partner up with WWE NXT for a collaboration? And if so, what matches are you interested in seeing? Sound off in the comments. After Clash at the Castle, the fans in Glasgow were not happy that CM Punk had cost Drew McIntyre, and another person who was especially unhappy was Wade Barrett. Speaking after the match, Barrett was outraged that Punk had cost McIntyre the title match against Damian Priest, and went as far as to say Punk should be fired. It seems Barrett's comment crossed the line, as on Smackdown, it was shared that the commentator had been reprimanded and was going to be a total professional going forward. Barrett acknowledged that temperatures were at a boiling point following the show, and admitted that he said some things I probably should not have said. Wade has learned his lesson now, though we have to wonder if WWE acknowledging these comments on SmackDown is a tease of something in the works down the line. More from SmackDown, as a few weeks ago, LA Knight issued a challenge to US champion Logan Paul, only to be rejected by the social media megastar. Knight then took matters into his own hands and invaded Paul's house, which certainly got the Maverick's attention, and their beef continued with last night's show. Knight came out to the ring and called out Paul, who didn't show up, but it was Santos Escobar who came out instead and called Knight a delusional fanboy. When Knight said he has beaten Santos in the past and is hence looking past him, Escobar attempted an attack, only to be thwarted by Knight, who hit the BFT. This situation allowed Logan Paul the opportunity to jump Knight from behind and send him into the ring post before landing a right-hand punch on the popular superstar. This is all building toward a triple threat on next week's show, which will see Paul, Knight, and Escobar compete with a spot in the men's Money in the Bank ladder match on the line. Do you think it's time WWE put a title on LA Knight before his popularity risks fizzling out? Or should this story be extended even longer? Give your thoughts down below. Now, social media has profoundly transformed how wrestling fans engage with the sport, making clips easily accessible and enabling anyone to offer commentary. In the wrestling industry, a viral video can propel a talent to new heights, but a mishap can just as quickly subject them to intense scrutiny and has the potential to derail a career. While speaking with the Canadian press, Chris Jericho addressed these shifts and pointed out how in the past, wrestlers could hone their craft for years despite occasional bad matches. These matches would be hidden from widespread visibility, unlike these days where every performance is scrutinized as if for a global audience. He explained, "Back in those days, you could have really bad matches for years and you would learn. Now it's all up for everyone to see. I think from an experience standpoint, guys and girls are rushed because of that. One of the benefits is you can be seen on YouTube, and if you're really good, you can suddenly create a real big buzz for yourself much faster than back in the day. In the early days of my career, it was more done by word of mouth, magazines, the different territories that you're working in Japan or something, you could build an image and then come to the States." But what's your view on what Chris Jericho has to say about social media? Is it doing more harm than good for wrestlers honing their craft? Let us know in the comments section below. The first Money in the Bank qualifier on SmackDown featured Bianca Belair, Chelsea Green, and Mia Yim, and the bout started abruptly after we returned from a quick break. Green was sent out of the ring so Michin and the EST could trade blows, but after a couple of minutes, we got another commercial break, cutting off a good portion of the action. There were no allies in the ring and nobody at ringside to help anyone cheat, so this was a competitive fight between all three competitors for its entire, albeit interrupted, runtime. Yim hit Green with a Styles Clash, but Belair was there to break up the pin, and Green stole the win by throwing Belair out of the ring so she could pin Yim after a KOD. This was a solid match that had a genuinely surprising outcome, which is always good in the predictable world of pro wrestling. What are your thoughts on Chelsea Green qualifying for the Women's Money in the Bank match on SmackDown? Sound off in the comments. More from SmackDown, as with Solo welcoming another member to his version of the Bloodline, WWE have already planned Roman Reigns' return in a huge way. WWE Creative are currently working on a plan that the Tribal Chief could form his own faction to fight Sikoa's stable on WWE SmackDown. As of this writing, WWE is booking for the head of the table to make a comeback along with two real-life Bloodline members, Zilla FATU and Jimmy Uso. Zilla FATU, who is the son of the late Umaga, has been teasing his involvement in the Bloodline saga for a while. The real-life Bloodline member took to X to post a cryptic message following Jacob Fatu's debut on the latest episode of SmackDown. He could be another name who could play an important role in the upcoming potential Bloodline civil war. Talking about Jimmy Uso, he has been off TV since he was brutalized and kicked out of the Bloodline by the Enforcer. However, he could return alongside Roman to avenge his humiliation. What do you think of Roman Reigns returning with his own faction? Should he take on Solo and his cronies alone, or return with his own faction? Sound off in the comments below. Following the match, Michin was upset backstage when Tiffany Stratton walked in and mocked her loss, but when Stratton went to attack her, Michin blocked and slapped her across the face. At this moment, Nia Jax attacked Michin, dropping her to the floor in the continuation of their feud on the Blue brand. This assault could lead to a match at Money in the Bank between Jax and Michin, with Tiffany seemingly backing the irresistible force, which could pay off for both women. With Jax set for a title match at SummerSlam, it appears she's already recruiting some backup, which may spell doom for Bayley and her reign as WWE Women's Champion. In Money in the Bank qualifier action, Randy Orton, Tonga, and Carmelo Hayes competed for a shot in the men's match, and as expected, there was Bloodline interference. Tonga Loa appeared to aid his ally, but Kevin Owens emerged to take him out, distracting Randy Orton in the process and giving Carmelo Hayes an opening. Melo pinned Orton to qualify for his first Money in the Bank ladder match, and on Twitter shared that all signs indicate that Carmelo Hayes is winning Money in the Bank next month. Hayes is immensely confident in the match and has past multi-man ladder match experience, and we'll have to see if his signs are accurate next month in Toronto. In another triple threat match with Money in the Bank implications, fans saw Grayson Waller, Andrade, and Kevin Owens face off, though the prize fighter was less than 100%. Owens was assaulted by Tonga and Tonga Loa during his entrance, only to be saved by his ally Randy Orton, but still decided to go ahead in the bout. The closing moments of the bout saw Andrade executing a DDT on Grayson Waller to pin him to the mat and secure the coveted spot in the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. With this win, Andrade joins Carmelo Hayes and Jey Uso, and after coming up short in the 2019 men's match, the WWE Speed Champion is planning on a different result 5 years later. Do you think WWE would let Andrade win Money in the Bank following his return to the company earlier this year, or will it be somebody else who holds the briefcase next month? More from SmackDown now, as the excitement didn't stop after this week's episode went off the air, as fans got the chance to see Monday Night Raw's Braun Strowman in action. In a dark match, the former Universal Champion defeated Ludwig Kaiser, ensuring the crowd went home happy at this week's stunning episode of the Blue Brand. When MVP formed the Hurt Business in 2020, the group was an instant hit with fans, but that didn't stop the faction from being split in early 2021 at Vince McMahon's discretion. The call was made despite all members pleading backstage to stick together, and while the group was reunited in 2021 mere months later, it was disbanded again shortly after. When MVP took to Instagram to share a post featuring the Hurt Business at its peak, this led to fans urging the former US champion to speak with Triple H to bring the group back together. MVP then revealed in multiple comments that he had already asked Triple H about bringing the Hurt Business back, but Triple H refused his request. Shelton Benjamin isn't in WWE anymore, so the chances of the Hurt Business reuniting are slim, and it's unclear why Triple H has rejected the idea of bringing the group together again. Are you interested in another reunion for the Hurt Business, even if it happens without Benjamin? Or have you moved on from the group? Let us know in the comments.